I would say one of the biggest discoveries for me is fluctuations based around hormones. That was a huge one for me to realise that has such an impact.
For me, it's kind of similar. It's actually the difference between women and men. I was shocked to find out that it's so internalised for most women.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't imagine my hyperactivity being just in here.
Yes.
It sounds like a way worse deal. It's really opened my eyes to a whole different side to ADHD.
It's like we all see this tiny snippet of this giant book, and there's just so much more to find out about it. It's crazy.
We've had such a great response to the podcast, and so many of you have been in touch asking what you can do to help. It's really simple. Just follow, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. That way we can reach more people, and that way we can celebrate these great minds that think differently. Today we're shining the spotlight on two incredible creatives shaking up the podcasting world. Jack Sotheby, an award-winning producer behind top UK podcasts NewlyWeds and Time and Again, teams up with his best friend and talented producer Kat Milsom to co-host Distracted. It's a podcast that dives deep into ADHD brains and why they can sometimes get so, well, distracted. It was a treat to meet other podcasters in this space. Great to meet Kat and Jack, and they just want to get the message out there, like us. So let's get into it. Let's see how great minds think differently. Kat, Jack, you guys are best mates, which is great. And you're both ADHD, which is also great. And I've heard you say also your friends are ADHD too. Does like attract like?
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's a lot of our friends who you kind of would assume they probably are ADHD, but then some are diagnosed and some are self-diagnosed or like on the waiting list, all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely about.
It's a bit of a running
we'll
joke,
put it that
isn't
way.
it? It's like, what have you got now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's helpful because when you're going off on tangents and having a conversation and going somewhere else and they're just with you on the journey.
Yeah.
No, we can just swish around and that's great.
Yeah. I kind of never really noticed it as much until I started firstly realised about ADHD myself, but then when you realise the interactions with other people, sometimes it's like, oh, this is actually quite hard work. Yeah. And it makes you feel grateful for the fact that with your friends, and if you're all on the same vibe, you can just tangent all over the shop.
You can, and you can acknowledge it and laugh about it and not judge it. And yeah, it does make a big difference.
It does. In my adult life, when you have more choice of who you spend your time with outside of school and stuff, I think the people I've picked up along the way, definitely a lot of neurodivergence around there.
I used to live in a warehouse and there was 24 of us in this warehouse.
Wow.
This was a few years ago. And this is quite a good experiment to see what kind of person you like.
Yeah.
With 24 people. And I just gravitated towards the creative ADHD people. Straight away. I was like, God, you're giving me energy right now.
Yeah.
For me, anyway, so hyperactive. It's like, I can't just be in a room with people who are not going to be like that. It's too much.
Yeah, it is. And it also, it makes you not feel weird. That's honestly one of the biggest things. You don't feel like a standout weirdo.
Yes, that's it. We're all winners together.
But it is great because that's how you find your tribes and your bands and your communities and all that kind of stuff is, you want to be with people where there's shared values and we all see the world a bit the same, and guess what, we can all be ourselves, and guess what, we all like similar things, and that's how I guess people get it. And when you don't have to explain everything.
I mean, I didn't know I had ADHD when I first met Jack,
but you thought Jack did.
I just found out.
Jack had been diagnosed
a few months before.
I kind of thought you did anyway.
Yeah,
it was a kind of a known thing, right?
It was.
But then Mia had no idea that at that point.
I said I had it, and I think that maybe started the ball rolling, and you were seeing stuff online.
I hadn't thought anything. When I met you as ADHD, I was like, Jack has ADHD, didn't consider anything about the crossover with me.
And what did you know, Kat, about ADHD to be thinking that Jack might be?
I would say more of the classic, being very excitable, high energy. Yeah.
The hyperactive.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, honestly, that is what I knew about it, really. So I never considered that as me. And then it was just off the back of seeing someone's story talking about their ADHD. It's just someone I follow. And I was like, oh my God. And then I suddenly realised it. I spent the whole night researching. I was watching videos. I was up till 4 or 5 a.m. watching everything because I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I had no idea.
It is
Everything's
mad,
making
isn't it?
so much
when
sense.
You don't know, then you feel like you're the last to know.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
no one's surprised when you tell them.
Yeah. I did you could do, like the online tests. where you
Yes.
actually- I did it in the barbers actually when I was waiting, and I almost thought the test was fake because all the questions were
It
so
just fits, doesn't it?
describing me. I was like, this
Yeah.
isn't. Personally, I found it quite funny because it was so similar to
Yeah.
me. And I showed it to my mum, and she just found it hilarious because she was like, "Oh my god, like losing stuff, not listening, forgetful." She was like, "It's you." I was like, oh, "Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
me."
A question for both of you, I guess. Then tell me about that process from thinking you might be
Mhm.
to then going and getting an assessment.
So actually, I'm still on the waiting list.
Okay.
I went to my GP and everything pretty much immediately after doing the research because I was like, okay, 100%.
How was your GP?
Absolutely fine, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, just referred me straight away. And then I'd been told to go on the right to choose thing.
Yes.
So I did that straight away. But since then, it's just been absolutely nothing.
When I did the test, actually, I just found it a bit underwhelming, actually, because I already knew. I just knew in my body and my soul that I had ADHD.
Yeah, it's so clear.
And when I did the test and I sat down with some stranger and he asked me a bunch of questions, and I answered the questions, and then he's like, "Yep, you've got it." And I was like, "Oh, right." I had to go private because I couldn't wait. And I think
Yes.
there's a lot of people that can't afford
That's
that.
the thing.
And so they're on
sure.
this 5-6 year
Yeah.
waiting list.
Literally could be, you just have no idea how long
22
it is.
years, I heard this morning
You're
from
joking.
Amanda, who's 40 years in this space, saying
Oh my
there are in
gosh.
certain locations 22 years.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
Wild.
no one's going to wait. And so the self-diagnosis in that,
I think
It's
it is
totally
really
valid.
It's really important because as long as you're doing the research, I think people get really wound up on socials and all over when they see clips and they're like, everyone thinks they've got ADHD. I just think if you see something in that, there is a reason. And of course, some of it, it's all the general human experience. It's just way accentuated, right? That's
Yes.
the thing. That's the
Yes.
point. Everyone experiences
yes,
it.
everyone loses their keys.
Exactly.
Everyone.
It's the extremity of it.
Yep.
And how much it impacts your life
Yes.
and everything. There is a reason that people have to self-diagnose, and it's really important. Not everyone does it flippantly. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't just say, "Oh, I guess I got ADHD then."
The difficulty comes, I guess, with if you're not diagnosed formally and you want or need medication,
Yeah.
then that's really
Yeah, that's the thing. I would be interested to try it and see. But at the same time, I definitely have been forced into just putting stuff in place outside of that area, which has really helped me and actually had a huge impact over the past few years. So that's great.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just don't have access to the medication, even if I did want to try it
Yes.
still.
Why did you decide to start Distracted?
I've been doing podcasting and been in radio for like my whole life, really. And I've always wanted to do my own podcast. And then when I got the diagnosis, I was like, oh, maybe I could do it about ADHD. And I was searching for ADHD podcasts at the time, and there was nothing that really spoke to me
Yeah.
personally. And so I contacted Kat and was like, hey, I've got this idea for a podcast. Do you want to produce it for me? And
Yeah.
Kat was like, no, I don't want to produce. I want to present it with you.
Secretly to myself, been thinking, I really want to start an ADHD podcast because there's nothing that screams out to me that I wanted to listen to.
Okay.
I had imagined doing it with Jack, but I was like, I'm obviously not going to say anything because that's really embarrassing. I don't work in podcasts, I'd never done it, so it was scary. But then when Jack asked me to produce it, I was like, no, I really want to do it.
Yeah. For me, initially, it was like, oh, it's my, this was my thing. You were the
Mine.
producer. We've already
I
agreed in
know.
my head.
Yes.
I kind of thought about it and I was like, actually, this is perfect because we get on naturally. And in hindsight, it's the best accountability. The fact that it's us two every single week, it keeps us both accountable because we do all of the editing, the social clips, we do it all.
What about being ADHD do you think has really helped you doing the podcast and working together?
I think that sort of hyper focus
Yeah.
and ability to get something off the ground. And it's very like classic entrepreneurial, I've got an idea, boom, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's not think about all the consequences, let's just go for it. That's really helped, I think.
Definitely. And I guess also just like being very open and wanting to talk about feelings a lot helps.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like that's given us a lot to talk about.
So while I have you, because I'm sure there will be people listening and watching who have had I think I want to start a podcast thought. What advice do you give to people who want to start a podcast?
I would say if you've got an idea and a concept for it, just do a pilot straight away. So like do one episode, just do one, because I've fallen short of it as well, where I've done all this planning and created the whole vibe in the studio, and we got in the studio, recorded one episode, and we're like, oh, actually it's not quite right. Or maybe you don't even enjoy it, or, there's loads of factors. And actually you could study something for 10 years, but before you actually do the job, you won't know how it is.
Yeah.
Distracted, your podcast, you cover so many different topics that are so relatable, obviously, to ADHD. How do you choose those ADHD topics?
So generally, most of the time, it's like, I've had a bad week with this thing, let's talk about it. That's what inspires my ideas of the topics. Or it's like a seasonal thing, what's relevant to the season.
Can you give me an example of that?
So we were looking at SAD, seasonal affective disorder, and how ADHD people are way more likely to be affected by SAD than neurotypical people. And so we just thought we'd share our own personal stories, and we dived into a bunch of facts and looked into it. We were trying to figure out, like from our own experiences, why ADHD people can become a bit more like deflated in wintertime. And if you think it gets so dark so early on, there's so much less life and energy being buzzed into you from the sun.
Yes.
And I think that's got to make a massive difference to people like us who just need that buzz,
Yeah. What has surprised you about ADHD now versus a year ago?
I would say one of the biggest discoveries for me is fluctuations based around hormones. That was a huge one for me to realize that has such an impact. I never even really considered it. And we did an episode talking about PMDD, which for anyone who doesn't know is basically about very intense PMS. And I'm not going to give an exact quote here, but this was kind of a wild fact that ADHDers are more likely to suffer from it. But if you're autistic, it's like in the 90%. You're going to have PMDD as well.
Wow.
It's just crazy that there's so many people, but it's so not spoken about and not many people know about it. But it's like really scary how much it can impact people.
Yeah.
We put out a clip about it and it just absolutely flew because there were so many people on it like, oh my God, this is what I have. And like, I'm so glad people are talking about it now and going to the GP about it.
That's everything, isn't it? When you get those ding.
Yeah.
Moments where you're like, oh my God, I feel like I've discovered something and nobody knows. And nobody knows? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How do people not know about this?
To be honest, is like one of the main reasons we're doing the podcast. It's like we want to spread that information whilst both learning about it way more ourselves.
Yeah.
We want to help other people learn about it and feel heard and get that information out there.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't know to search for that,
No. And so how else are you going to come across it?
Yeah, exactly.
Jack, what about for you?
For me, it's kind of similar. It's actually the difference between women and men and how different it is in women. I was shocked to find out that it's so internalized for most women.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't imagine my hyperactivity being just in here.
Yes.
It sounds like a way worse deal. I can really get it out, and be loud. And it's really opened my eyes to a whole different side to ADHD that I had no idea about really before.
And makes total sense as to why females have been missed.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like we all see this tiny snippet of this giant book and there's just so much more to find out about it, but everyone just has this tiny little paragraph about the information.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
What are your niggles, bugbears about the world of ADHD?
Mine is people getting angry with people for having ADHD. Honestly, it winds me up so much. When people comment on our videos.
Oh, here we go.
Come on.
Here we go.
And
Get
they're
it out,
just
girl.
like, oh, another black person talking about ADHD. They all think they got it. Snowflakes. And it's like, sorry, we've just talked about how sensitive we are and now you're commenting that. Read the room.
We are completely different when it comes to comments. Kat takes all the comments to heart and really cares, which is amazing because it's the good and the bad. Whereas I don't care about any of the comments.
Okay.
I really don't.
Yeah, you're good at just switching
I just
off
don't
to
care.
it. I can't. It will ruin my day.
I don't know who they are. I love the nice comments, but if they say something bad, I'm like, that's just weird. If I see something and really don't like it, I just won't say anything.
Yeah.
I'll just scroll.
Yeah.
But you taking
It
time
is
out
weird
your
to
day.
say that. I know.
It's just a weird thing to do. So I'm like, you're just quite strange.
It's so
What's the
true.
worst thing someone said?
The only comment that's actually hit me, this clip made me watch the full episode and actually I listened to it and I didn't like it. I switched it off actually. It's usually better than this or something. I was like, oh.
Jack, is there anything for you? Any bugbears?
This obsession that you need to have the test to be able to say I've got ADHD.
Yeah.
That grinds my gears. And to be honest, it's actually the only real reason I got the test, not for medication. It was just to tell people, because I'd be like, yeah, I've got ADHD. They're like, have you done the test though? It's like, no, I haven't. Oh, well, do you actually have it then?
Yeah, that I find really interesting as well. This kind of, but you're not as bad, or you can't, no, you can't be because you're
yeah,
right.
you managed to do this thing. Or, yeah.
Do you think that there's a lot more stigma around autism than there is ADHD? Because from the outside, it feels like there is.
I think the stigma's different.
Yeah.
I think ADHD is going along the lines of, oh yeah, everyone's got it, or have you had the test, or you're not that bad, or equally, oh, I lost my keys a couple of times, therefore I must be ADHD.
Yeah.
Autism, I think, is probably a bit behind on the understanding side of things.
Yes.
You're not on medication, Jack?
No.
Why not?
I think I'm lucky enough to be doing something that I love and have been doing it for a long time. And I run my own business, Podcast House, like a recording studio and production company. And so I've been able to scope my life in a way where I'm doing stuff that I enjoy all the time. You know, there's obviously parts that I don't, but a lot of the work I do, I love. And so I can focus on it. I'm like hyper focusing every day because I'm really enjoying the work. I want to get skills so I can improve my weaknesses instead of taking medication. I don't feel like I need the medication, basically.
And what are you currently trying to work on?
Like the organization stuff,
Okay.
the planning, the organization, memory is honestly shot to bits. It's not great.
Same.
And also, because I'm running a business, I'm like, I've got people in to be able to do that stuff. I'm like really bad at scheduling.
Okay.
But weirdly enough, sometimes if I'm in the mood, and
Same.
you know,
if you're in the right zone of it,
like over
so
Christmas, I was like, but let's get that scheduling down. Made a whole processing thing, made the Excel came out, the green button on the computer. So,
How do you try and improve the parts that you find challenging about being ADHD?
I've definitely made so many improvements since starting the podcast even. A lot of acceptance, so much acceptance, which has been huge. Because the stress and getting wound up about not doing stuff in a way I think I should be doing it makes everything so much worse.
Yeah.
So letting go of that has been huge in itself, I would say.
How consciously have you done that?
Well, I think it's been a lot from talking to other people and getting that it's not just me.
Yes.
Understanding that a lot of people struggle with it and it's related to ADHD. So it's not just me being useless, there's a reason for it.
Yep.
But also starting to realize that once I adapt how I do these things, it makes it easier and I'm better at it. So I'm not just trying to fit into how I think I should be doing it. It's like, I actually have the freedom to just change how I'm doing it. And then it's so much better,
Yeah.
And also just having the words to communicate, I struggle with this thing. And being more conscious of the fact that I struggle with it rather than just being like, I procrastinate so much. It was probably a month before I realized I had ADHD. I was doing all these tests, I was getting ads about procrastination and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, it's me, procrastination. Why am I so bad at procrastinating? And I was going to buy this £100 thing for an app to be like, stop procrastinating. Now I realize it was because of ADHD. But that was one of the things that I used to get so annoyed with myself about. Why can I not just sit down and do the thing? And now I understand why. And there's a lot of stuff that has to be in place for me to actually just go ahead and do something.
And so what do you now do in order to try and do the thing?
Basically, exercising helps a lot. It's basically all the boring stuff that everyone knows, but exercising, getting good sleep.
Yeah.
Having more of a structure, I think, because being freelance, I can just work when I want to most of the time. And in a way that is really good for me, but sometimes it just means that I'll keep finding other stuff to do.
How much of it is distraction and how much of it is procrastination?
I think I distract myself
intentionally.
intentionally. Yeah, I think they kind of are because it's I'll suddenly think of another thing that I need to research and I'll just find myself on another tab or I'll be like, oh, washing up. There's always something that I can think of. If I don't want to do something, I can find a million ways to avoid it. But having a timer of just being right, I'm just going to do 20 minutes, just 20 minutes. Because I used to just block out my day right, do that project. That's my day. And that is so daunting. And I would spend the whole day avoiding it and not do it. And the cycle would just continue. So I'm just like, right, 20 minutes, sit down, do that. And then I'll be like, right, this is a game now. I've got 5 minutes after that 20 minutes. I'm going to run over and do the washing up. I've got to be back by the time that beeper goes off. And I'm like, 20 minutes, let's get this done. And like that helps so much.
If you've got something boring or something you don't want to do, just
It's
time
the way
yourself
to do
and see
it.
like how quickly and efficiently can I do this?
Okay.
Yeah. It's difficult because when you get locked into a hyperfocus, you don't want to stop after 20 minutes. So that can be hard. But I also am like, I know I need to do it because otherwise 2 hours down the line, I'm going to be burnt out. So it's like, right, 20 minutes, wee break, something, anything.
Yes.
Go stand outside for a bit. Any little bits. And you feel so good because you are ticking stuff off that list. Like, I'm putting the laundry on. I'm doing all sorts of stuff.
Those list and the tick box, strike and the tick.
Yeah.
Double dopamine hit for everything you do. It's a no-brainer.
Jack, what have you put in place that helps you?
For me, a lot of it has been eradicating the shame that comes with the negative sides. So like being forgetful, losing stuff is a big one for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Really picking stuff up and putting it in stupid places. When they're in my hand at the time, they completely lose their value. I just forget. And stopping myself from beating myself up so relentlessly about it and going, oh, okay, I'm just not that good at that. Fine, okay, cool. I'll just put these in place. That's fine. I'll do that.
And
Noticing
then what have you
patterns.
both learned about how your brains work where you're like, oh, I'm actually really good at this?
The hyper focus for me, man,
Yeah.
is like, I mean, this is probably the classic answer,
Yeah.
but I could do like a whole week's worth of work in a couple hours if I'm really in, really. I mean, it is wild, isn't it? I'm sure you've been there where you look at the clock and it's 2 p.m. and you look at the clock again and it's 10. It's like, what? It's dark.
Yeah.
I haven't eaten. I'm so thirsty. But, I need the toilet, but everything is done and it's like glistening.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa.
I think definitely like having a deep understanding of people. That's one of my big ones. Like a very emotional gal.
Okay.
And that's always been quite a big thing for me. I've always felt overly emotional.
Okay.
And I think now that I have more of an understanding of myself and of RSD, that was a huge one. Not knowing about that. Because growing up, I've always struggled with that a lot and just thought, why am I so sensitive? But now I just feel like I love that about myself because I love how much I can understand people and empathize with people.
What a cool thing, though, to like flip something totally on its head and embrace it as being
Definitely.
great human thing
For sure.
to have.
Don't get me wrong, I get frustrated with it because it's annoying when like you really don't want to be crying and you're crying, you know? Or like you're just in a situation where it would be really bad to get emotional and you can't control it. But most of the time, I do love it about myself. I'm glad that I can feel that deeply about things. We've discussed before on the flip side, I feel everything deeply, like the strong emotions about like happiness and joy, like even tiny things can make me feel so overwhelmingly happy. And I love that. I do love that.
My wife's like that. She's not ADHD, but she's really empathetic. And I am, when I see people, empathy is like this double-sided coin of intuitively feeling empathetic when you can't see it or you don't know it.
Yes.
And then when you can see it and you do know it. But with autism, the stereotype is that, oh, we're really not empathetic. Can't experience empathy. And actually it's
Yeah.
It's just that if I can't see it, I'm going to struggle.
Yeah, if you've got to like read between the lines a bit more.
Yeah.
In my relationship, I'm like, right, if there's a conflict, I'm like, you've got to baby me right now, like really lay out exactly how you feel and what you would like from it. Yeah. And it helps so much because then I know exactly what they're feeling. Because otherwise there is a disconnect for me. I don't always read that stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The thing with me as well, though, is I definitely read, like I'm constantly between those lines reading stuff.
Okay.
But at the same time, I do have to be conscious of where the RSD element comes in and where I'm just making up stuff.
Yeah.
You know, because I can read something and I can gauge someone's body language seems off, but then I'll think it's my fault. Or there's so many things that I can create out of that. So it's kind of like I still need that clear what's going on because otherwise I can go off into another realm just freaking out about how they feel.
Yeah.
Just thinking they're off, but like making up so many narratives about why.
Yes. One of the things I guess I've enjoyed over the last couple of years about learning the differences between ADHD in men and ADHD in women is hearing the narrative around lots of women saying, oh, people said I was too emotional. People said I was too sensitive and not saying people said I was naughty and hyperactive.
Yeah.
And that emotional, empathetic, sensitivity side being like this key characteristic actually of ADHD in women that is so cool when you flip it on its head and go, that's an amazing thing.
I think men have it as well, actually.
Yes.
But I actually think we're less in touch with it in many respects.
Yes.
On the sort of worst side, I get angry really quick.
Okay.
It's a real hot switch. And that is extreme sensitivity. Something's happened, I'm extremely sensitive, and that's my reaction. Boom! And I think the more men talk about how they feel, which is obviously a rarity, but the more they do, the more they'll realise, especially if they're ADHD, that they are really sensitive as well. They're either internalising those emotions or it's externalising through different means, like anger or whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of my feeling comes out around my kids. I love my kids so much that I'm really happy to cry about them. I'm crying not because I'm happy about them. I'm crying because I care about them and love them so much. And I don't want anything bad to happen to them ultimately. But being able to be okay with being in touch with that and saying it, I'm like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And men need to be okay with that.
Definitely.
Do you think that side has come out of you since having kids? Or has that been there before?
I do. Yeah. I only cry about two things. And one is my kids. And the second is listening to music. If it's my children related, then I'm definitely going to cry.
Yeah.
And if it's music.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I like
I get that
crying.
with certain songs as well.
It's good.
Yeah. I think it's
it
really
is good.
cathartic.
The more you do it, the more you do it as well, I find with crying.
Yeah.
You can get
Once
into it.
you open the
Once
tap.
you start opening the tap, it's easier to do it.
Yeah.
I had like a good 3-4 years, no crying. Just
Really?
Okay.
straight out, no
Dry
crying.
years.
So
Okay.
shut
Dry
off.
years.
Yeah, the dry years. It was like the Sahara out there.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't
There's
know
some
how.
blockage going on
It
there.
was a huge blockage.
Wow,
Every time I felt
crazy.
emotion, I would just tell myself like, "Don't cry."
Yeah, I wonder how else
Don't
that ended
cry.
up coming out, like how that manifested for you.
A numbness.
Crazy. Just
A numbness. Yeah,
You sort of disconnect from your body
yeah.
and then you're not in touch. Cat's kind of like,
I
what
cannot
the fuck are you
imagine
guys
that.
talking about? So we have these green badges. And so I wanted to give you guys a badge.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks.
Here's a badge.
Thank you.
This is fun.
Fun.
I'd like to give you this badge for you to give to someone else.
Okay.
But I'd like you to tell me who you think you'd like to give that badge to and why.
So I would like to give it to my husband because he is the most incredible support ever. And he has just been so amazing throughout this whole journey of like figuring out what's going on in my head and life, and so understanding and patient with everything. And so I think that he deserves a badge.
Yeah, I think that is very good. Jack.
I'm going to give it to my dad
Okay.
because he definitely has ADHD. The symptoms are so clear, and I think this might be a nice little slow entrance into the world. Hey, Dad, do you like badges? Love badges, son. Well, guess what? It's loaded. Sit down.
That's really good.
Here's a badge for
Thank
Dad.
you
Jack.
so much.
And thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for having us on.
No, thanks for coming on and lending me your brains, basically.
100%. Thank you for having us. Honestly, I've had
Yeah,
like
it's been
the
so
best
fun.
time.